Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. On your ballot this fall will be, well, should we have wolves? Well, it's not just that simple. Greg Walcher was the head of the Department of Natural Resources here in Colorado. He's been I think he's been a 15 generation here, Coloradan on the Western Slope. How many generations did your family go back, Greg?
Well, 5 in Colorado.
Wow. Yeah, well, your family probably goes back farther than 5, but in Colorado. And you're part of a group of natural resources experts. What is that group?
It's a firm I have. The Natural Resources Group is a sort of a loose coalition of consultants around the country with expertise in wildlife and water and public lands and forests and energy and so on.
Let me just dive right into the issues of they keep saying reintroducing wolves. But really, is it reintroducing wolves or is it introducing a new species of wolves? I'm confused that of the species that's supposed to come in. And when I hear that there's a ballot issue to reintroduce the wolf, it tells me that this species was here before. Do I have that right?
Well, you've got the right question, that's for sure. And the proponents are confusing the issue on purpose. This is not a reintroduction. It's an introduction of a species that is not native to Colorado. And in fact, it's one of the reasons I think it's a bad idea, frankly. The species of wolves that was native to Colorado is a species of timber wolves that is extinct now. And so the gray wolves from Canada, Montana, somewhere up north, they won't say where yet, is the best they can do right now. But it is not a species native to Colorado. And frankly, we don't know how they will behave when they get to this state. The environment is different, and particularly the fact that Colorado has 6 million people living in it, and that is an environment that these wolves are not used to.
Let me dumb it down to a level even I can understand. So I have not the experience you have in natural resources, but I did see Jurassic Park, which I think is pretty much gives me the same qualifications. In Jurassic Park, they couldn't quite get the dinosaurs reintroduced, so they ended up kind of splicing together different dinosaur DNA and bringing something in that's really close to what we used to have here. So in the same way, as a really bad analogy, we're not reintroducing a wolf, we're transplanting a different wolf from a completely different place in the Americas into Colorado, should this proposal pass this fall. How'd I do?
That's exactly right. And in fact, it has not yet been defined how many wolves or where they would come from or how they would be managed when they got to the state, or how the compensation system might work if they kill cows or whatever. None of that has been determined yet. This is just an open-ended ballot question saying we ought to spend whatever it takes, undefined, to bring in non-native wolves into Colorado, and people are supposed to vote for it or against it just based on that lack of clarity, which is part of what's a bad idea about it. I also don't like it just as a Western Sloper, by the way. Just because it's drafted in a way that the wolves are required to be introduced west of the Continental Divide. And so with a bunch of folks who are funding that 90% of the money for this.
You don't understand how politics works in Colorado. We are now an urban-centric government where we've got a boulderite for a governor, a boulderite for an AG, boulderite for our Secretary of State, our Speaker of the House is a boulderite, our Senate Majority Leader is a boulderite. We've been to the Western Slope because you guys have some wineries out there, but that's all we know about the Western Slope. We have an urban-centric population, we have an urban-centric government, and therefore we have an urban-centric media, and I don't think we quite realize in the city what having wolves out in the rural populations mean. I gotta be honest, it sounds really cool to have wolves in Colorado.
Well, I don't know.
Because I saw Game of Thrones, and the wolves in Game of Thrones were badass cool.
I don't know if they don't understand it or if they don't want to know, but 10% of the money for this ballot initiative is coming from the Sierra Club's office in Boulder. The other 90% is coming from California. And ironically, Boulder and San Francisco are places where wolves were once native. And yet they're not proposing to reintroduce them there, not at all. Nowhere on the Front Range, no place where all the people in Colorado might actually encounter a wolf. They love, like you're saying, the idea of wolves in the high country as long as they don't have to deal with it. But I don't think they'll like the long-term result of the decimation that it can cause in the populations of other Colorado wildlife, as what happened with the basically the extinction of the moose in Yellowstone when they were reintroduced there. But the bigger issue in Colorado is the conflict with people. They've been reintroduced, as you know, in Yellowstone, but Wyoming has 500,000 people scattered over a territory as big as Colorado. Montana, where they were introduced at one point, has barely 1 million people. Colorado has 6 million people, and they are widely distributed in a number of cities all over the state. There's no possible way that a roaming species like wolves can be introduced without having an effect on population, without encountering roads and pickups and hunters and people and livestock and all the rest.
You used a term I don't understand: roving or roaming species. What does that mean? Are they beatniks? What is it?
I just mean they're not a species that stays put. If you decide to reintroduce them in Walden, that doesn't mean they're going to stay in Walden. They roam wide range distances. In fact, we have some that have been seen in northern Colorado that were introduced into Yellowstone, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles away. They range far distances, just because it's the way wolves behave. When the pups get old enough to be adults, they get kicked out of the pack and they have to go set up their own territory somewhere else. So they spread far and wide fairly quickly.
And let me ask you about the wolves that have been spotted in Colorado. It's odd to say we're going to reintroduce a species that's never been here, and now the species that's never been here is naturally coming anyway because, let me see if I got this one right, because they were forced into Yellowstone, which is a long way away, and now they're already into Colorado. So
that's right.
How?
But from John,
didn't they already win? I mean, it seems like
there is a difference between species that have adapted to an environment and moved along versus species that we're going to trap in Canada and fly them a couple of thousand miles away and release them in front of a bunch of TV cameras. We learned this lesson, or we should have learned this lesson, when we introduced the lynx into the high country of Colorado 15 years ago when I was at the Department of Natural Resources. We found the first lynx that we introduced in Colorado almost all died. They starved to death. They were scared to death with the process of being trapped and caged and taken away so far away from home and introduced into a strange place with a bunch of TV cameras from National Geographic watching. And so the first thing they did was run as fast and far as they could away from the best habitat that had been identified for them. And lots of them starved. We discovered they changed the protocols, and that has become an enormously successful introduction effort now. But the first thing we found out is that introducing species that are not native, as they were not, can cause all sorts of problems. And there's a reason. And lynx are a benign species as far as man is concerned. They don't carry little kids away from the campfire. They don't kill your pets in the backyard and so on. They don't cause any of those kind of problems. They don't kill deer and elk and moose for the most part. So they're different from wolves in that respect. One of the things that we must have learned watching kudzu take over California and Florida, watching Burmese pythons invade the Everglades, we surely have learned by now that introducing non-native species into a non-native habitat is almost always a bad idea. So there's a reason that Colorado's top wildlife experts on the Wildlife Commission and in the agency, the top biologists in our state, have looked at this issue over and over and over again and decided that it's a bad idea in a state with 6 million people.
Let me ask you about why it's a bad idea. I know that cattlemen, people who are farmers, people who make their living in rural areas, are petrified about introducing this species into Colorado. Listen, I'm a suburban guy. I wouldn't know why they're scared. What's the big deal? It seems as though, yeah, they might kill a cow here and there, but there are a lot of cows around. Why is this such a scary thing to cattlemen?
Well, it's easy for people to say who don't own the cows. I mean, those cows are worth $1,000 a piece, and if you're a rancher whose livelihood depends on the number of cows that you have out on the range, you can't afford to lose them. So they're scared about it because they know that wolves will kill cattle.
But isn't there a way for them to be reimbursed for their losses under this?
There is, and there was a program adopted by the federal government in the case of Yellowstone to compensate ranchers, and there's been some level of success as a result of that. But the ballot initiative in Colorado doesn't require that, doesn't specify it at all. It leaves all those details to some future decision of some future wildlife commission should the voters pass it. So I don't know whether that would be part of the deal or not, and I don't know whether the compensation would be properly administered, whether it would work, how much it would be.
So
We don't know any
the
of that.
ballot initiative has no mention which mandates compensation for loss by this governmental action.
I don't want to overstate, and I think it should be. I think it's clear that even among the proponents, there's sort of a general understanding that that would have to be part of the deal, but it isn't part of what's specified in the plain language of the ballot initiative. So I'm skeptical when people don't want to answer questions like that and don't want to write it down. Then I don't know what the real plan is, because I do know that the Wildlife Commission that would be in charge of it has decided this is a bad idea.
It has happened in other states. You said that they did it in Wyoming. Are they happy in Wyoming with the results?
It depends entirely on who you ask. The Sierra Club office in Boulder is ecstatic about it, and the advocates of it who have written books and gotten rich selling photographs of them and so on, they're all ecstatic about it. I know lots of ranchers up there who are not ecstatic about it, and there's all sorts of big game hunters and other sportsmen who are not pleased at all about it because it had a devastating effect on the populations of moose and deer and elk.
Is there any danger to humans? And I'm not talking. I understand to their property. I understand to their cattle. I understand, but is there any worry that wolves are actually going to attack people?
Well, they have. I would say people may not be their favorite food, and it may not be their first choice, but there are numerous examples of people being attacked by wolves. You can't say that there are tens of thousands of cases like that, but there are several dozen cases like that documented in the last 100 years, and in New Mexico in particular, where the population of Mexican wolves has just exploded. They're increasing at the rate of 25% per year. And there are people building cages around the school bus stops down there because they're worried about their kids being out by themselves when there are packs of roaming wolves in the neighborhood.
Excuse me?
So, yeah. I mean, it gives you pause to see photographs of little kids waiting in a cage for the school bus to come by, just in case the pack of wolves is on the prowl. So I don't know. I don't want to over sensationalize it, but yes, wolves will attack people, and they will kill people.
If you could say in the number one concern you have as a guy who's been in dealing with natural resources as a career, what is the number one hesitation you have over this? What is the number one reason this is a bad idea?
I think the most important thing is that Colorado is just frankly not the right place to do this. There are plenty of unpopulated areas in the West where populations of various species can be recovered in full, as has happened in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho, in most of Canada and almost all of Alaska, where wolf populations are very healthy. It's a species that is not endangered. In fact, the federal government is finally taking them off the endangered list. So there's no danger of extinction. We need to be thinking, though, about whether or not Colorado is the right place to do it. And in a state that is heavily populated and that has giant urban centers, you can introduce wolves west of the Continental Divide, but you can't make them stay there. It's just frankly not the right place to experiment like that with non-native species whose behavior we don't really understand yet.
But wouldn't it be counter to the fact that they're already here? If there's already wolves here, doesn't that indicate that this is good territory for them?
No, it indicates that they have reached the carrying capacity in whatever part of Wyoming they're coming down from. The land will only support a certain number, and then they kick, as I said earlier, they kick the new arrivals out and make them go somewhere else to set up their own territories. So they will continue to expand into territory that is not ideal for them. We're going to have conflicts in Colorado. There will be all sorts of impact on native wildlife, on livestock, on people. And frankly, lots of wolves are going to get killed. Our state has lots and lots of cars running around on the highways as well. And so I don't think it's fair to the wolves either.
I know you're not able to answer this question fully, but give it your best shot. So the Sierra Club in Boulder is, of course, loving this idea. Wolves won't be in Boulder. A lot of this money is coming from California because Colorado seems to be turning into California. But why is it important to those people proposing this to introduce wolves, this new species of wolves, into Colorado? When I ask them, if I ask them, this is important because, what are they likely to say?
Well, they're not going to tell you their real agenda, which is simply that species are the biggest tool in the toolbox if you want to stop human activity. So if you want to continue the attack on in order to close roads and ban snowmobiles and stop logging and stop oil and gas and stop grazing and stop public uses of the public lands and so on, there isn't any more powerful tool than an endangered species, a threatened species, something that the public cares about, a cute species like polar bears. It is the most powerful tool they have, and so they want to use wolves as a tool to stop human behavior.
So, in other words, instead of saying we need to do this for the kids, we now can say we have to do this for the wolves. We've got to ban this activity or that activity or this activity. That's fascinating. Hey, Greg, people want to get some information on this. Is there a place where they can go?
I've written several columns on the subject that are on my own website at gregwalcher.com. And there's lots of information on the web. Some of it is actually true. Some of it, you know how Al Gore's great internet works. So there's all kinds of phony information out there as well.
Greg, thank you for your time. Absolutely fascinating. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.